I want to wish you all a very, very warm welcome today. We're delighted to be holding this for you, and we hope that it's really enjoyable but fruitful and stimulating, and that you go back to your practices feeling enthused to move things forward. As always, we need to start with some housekeeping. I need to remind you that you should have been sent a parking permit to park outside, and if you haven't put it in your windscreen, I'm afraid you're likely to be fined by the university. It won't be us that fines you, but we will no doubt take a cut. Sorry, did I say that? I didn't mean to. The programme has been drawn up from the suggestions that people put on feedback forms when they come to other meetings. So if the programme misses something out, I'm afraid you have to blame your colleagues who basically wrote it for us. But no, seriously, we've pulled this together from the suggestions that you make of things that you want to do and want to hear about. And also, of course, we've added in a few things to really spice things up a bit today and really, as I say, help you feel enthused to go back to your practices. Back to the housekeeping. I've been told that we're not expecting a fire alarm today, so if the fire alarms go off, please do make your way out. There's a fire exit at the back there, otherwise it's through the front door, and the assembly point is at the front of this first part of the car park. We've had so many people asked to come to this today. We are absolutely splitting at the seams. The venue have told us we really couldn't have any more, and we have in fact indeed got a waiting list of people that wanted to come. But it does mean that because we've got so many of you here, that getting through the break times is going to be fairly time consuming. So please be patient. And as far as lunchtime is concerned, we've deliberately set up a queuing system of going into room 4 to pick up your plates and your cutlery, and then walk through to room 5 to get your food, and just try and ease the situation around the food. So do bear with us. Of course, I want to thank our sponsors, and I really want to encourage you to speak to our sponsors. The sponsors have been very carefully chosen. They are all in our portfolio of recommended consultants or suppliers. And in particular, they've been chosen because they're very pertinent to the work that you do in terms of purchasing and analysing water for Legionella and so on, those things that are causing anxiety. We hope we'll be able to help you with some of those things by you talking to the sponsors. Specifically, we've got John Searle and his team from City Water, along with Jackie Goss, who's there as a consultant on Legionella. Michael O'Donnell from Opus Telecommunications. We get a lot of people talking to us about telephone systems from time to time. Robert Lynch from MIAB, who most of you may well have come across from your insurance dealings with him. There's Phil Rusling out there from WG Office Supplies. We've recommended new office supplies in the last couple of years because we've managed to negotiate a better deal for you on office supplies, so really strongly suggest you speak to them. Stuart Jupp is there from Henry Schein Medical as well. And also Simon Maybury from ACAS, who's going to have a stand just outside the door. And whilst he's going to give you a talk on employment law a bit later on, he's also available to have one-to-one discussions more specifically about that. So please do find Simon, who's sitting here, and he will be standing just outside the door, both at coffee break and at lunchtime. So thank you to all our sponsors. So let's get on with the day. I want to kick things off by getting you to all stand up. Come on, you're all standing up. Very simple start to the day. Good, good. All right. No, I'm not going to expect you to introduce yourself to the person next to you. I expect you all know the person standing next to you. No, it's very simple. You can sit down when you can positively answer the questions, all right? So all those that fully understand the aims of the Health and Social Care Act can sit down. Good, good, good. And I'm assuming... Yes, I knew it was cynical. I thought you were going to say to cut costs, but yes, I'll accept that. So all those of you that have a very clear understanding of the vision for the next 10 years of your own practice. things aren't looking too good here. Well, I'm sure you'll all be sitting down afterwards, after the next question. All of you who feel that your GP employers fully understand your roles and responsibilities as a practice manager. I'm genuinely stuck now. But, you know, just please do sit down. The questions were, of course, very carefully chosen because I wanted you to all understand that we're living in an extremely difficult environment, but you are not alone. The majority of you, the majority of you, really cannot predict where we're going in the long-term future. And you as practice managers, of course, are in a very, very difficult situation there. But you are surrounded by colleagues who are in exactly the same position. So we are hoping that today will help you go back to your practices and get thinking about how do we make it possible to identify what's going to happen in the coming years. I chose this picture. I've got a few sniggers around the room. That's good, because it kind of feels a bit like that, doesn't it? It really does. Something extremely large, very heavy, and very noisy is just about to land on you. And the thing I like about this picture more than anything is these guys are just standing watching. You know, and we thought the army knew what they were doing. But anyway, so that picture, I thought, sort of epitomised where we are. The next thing I did when I was preparing my speech was to try and find some absolute classic speeches or sayings that other people have said. And you can usually turn to Charles Dickens or Shakespeare or something and find someone who really can summarise it all in one simple word. And I thought, hang on a minute, this one looks pretty good. I like this one. And of course, you know what the next question is. Who said it? Who said that? Who said that? But it actually does summarise things up a little bit, doesn't it? That it's sometimes an awful lot more comfortable to stay at home and do the things you like rather than get tied into all these difficult challenges ahead of us. Has anybody got any guesses? Marilyn Monroe. But I had to put that one up. I thought I might sort of wake you up with that one. But the one I actually really wanted, and the one I think probably summarises things from my point of view today, and the talk I want to give you, this brief talk this morning, is a Charles Darwin one. Critically, it's the one that's most adaptable to change that's going to survive. Those of you that know me know full well that I really genuinely believe that general practice is the cornerstone of the NHS. It has been since 1948. It's not just the continuity and coordination of patient care that's important and a key role for general practice. It's not the massive impact that general practice has had on public health. It's also that the general practitioners since 1948 have been key to the financial success of the NHS. It's the key to the fact that the NHS still spends far, far less per capita than anywhere in Europe, and it's less than half they spend in America, with not even taking into account the private sector. That's how successful general practice has been. And yet we're living at a time when the very survival of general practice is under threat, and you must all realise and recognise that very acutely. So how do we make sure that general practice does survive? Well, again, those of you that know me will have heard me say the key to survival is being able to adapt and flex to a very difficult environment, to continue to provide a very, very high quality of care, and therefore to move general practice very firmly into the 21st century. And of course, the next question is, who can really ensure the survival of general practice? Who really is in the driving seat? It's you. It's the practice managers. Practice managers clearly are critical to the survival of general practice. You're critical to the success of the Health and Social Care Act because I genuinely believe that it's practice managers that will make sure that there is meaningful engagement between CCGs and practices. It's you that will ensure that CCGs receive meaningful and logical data and information that can make commissioning groups survive and work well. You're certainly critical to ensuring that practices are sustainable by making them adaptable to the new environment, making sure that they're not frightened to changes, both those that you feel are necessary and those that are imposed from above. It's you that can really ensure that practices are actually innovative and can come up with the new ideas that CCGs are going to be dependent upon. It's you that ensures the provision of high-quality services in general practices. All but that very 10 minutes that the patient walks through the door, the rest of the service to patients is under your control. And I really want you to understand and realise that. So what do you need to get there and what do you need to achieve it? Oh, having trouble with the scroller. You obviously need to be able to show leadership. You need to develop your own skills and the skills of your team. You need to promote and encourage teamwork. You need to deliver excellent quality services and top quality performance in order to end up with an adaptable practice that's providing high quality care and is firmly in the 21st century. I suggest it's you who are in the driving seat. And today is all about giving you some confidence and courage to go back and exert your leadership skills to make sure your practices are ready for the 21st century. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much. So, with that start, I'm going to hand over to Patricia, who's going to take us through the next stage. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here today, and lots of faces that I know and know me. For the people who don't know me, Patricia Gray. My background is an HR specialist. I now work exclusively in general practice. I'm a consultant as well in practices. I facilitate, and I'm a trainer and I'm a performance coach. So lots of things, all in general practice. I used to be the practice manager of a big practice in Hertfordshire for 11 years. So I've done my stints. I know what it's like. And I left there 8 years ago to work independently. And actually, do you know what? It really has changed in the last 8 years. And I can see that from my work, when I work with practices, that it was always hard, you know, but it seems to be getting tougher. However, I'm a great optimist. And also I think, you know, the power of being positive and taking control of the situation is just so important. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm going to be helping facilitate the day and making sure that it runs along with the rest of the LMC team. What we want to do in this session is we want to get you guys thinking about what are the key issues really that you're facing, the things that you're concerned about, the things for the future, maybe the next 6 months, the next year, that are on your mind, the things that you're really, you know, starting to think, how am I going to do that? You know, the troubling things. Because actually what we want to do is we want to get those things on the table and say, these are the key issues from this group, and we want to sort of give some sort of priority to them. And then at the end of the day, we want to go back and say, have we managed to help with some of those issues? Are there some things that we can do in the future to provide help with? So I'm going to get you talking about this. So I'm going to stop talking, then we're going to come back. So what I'd like you to do is I want you to find groups of 4 or 5. Now, it might be that you're sitting next to them, but it might be somebody behind you. If you get a couple of people who you don't know, because I expect you're all sitting next to people you know. So in groups of 4 or 5, you can kind of just talk about, for the next 5 or 10 minutes, what are the 3 top issues that you kind of all agree are the key issues for yourselves as practice managers at the moment. And once you've decided what those key issues are, I mean, I expect there's lots of them. We're thinking about the priorities, the top issues. In your pack, you'll find those good old Post-it notes. And I'd like somebody to write down on 3 Post-it notes those issues, if you can make it sort of fairly legible so we can understand them. And then rank them. So top one, number 1, then 2 and 3. And then at the end of the session, I'm going to ask you to paste those Post-it notes on. We've got flip chart paper in here, and we've got them in the other room where you're going for tea and coffee and lunch. But what we're going to do is then at lunchtime, we're going to have a look at all those issues. We're going to kind of bunch them and get them into themes so that we can feed back to you what was the feeling around the room. Okay, so go for it. 4 to 5 people in groups. Doesn't matter how you sort yourselves out. And just amongst yourself, what are the 3 top things that you're really thinking about at the moment from a manager's point of view? Okay, if you can wrap your conversations, just wrap it up. Brilliant. Okay, well, obviously you were really entrenched in that, so difficult to pull you away from it, but great, absolutely great. So just to remind you, we've got post-it notes, good old post-it notes. What we want you to do at the end of the session is we want one of you to put them onto one of the flip charts up there or in the other room. They're both the same, so it's a duplicate. So it's 4 different areas because we kind of want you to decide where it would normally go. So you've got an issue. Is it about an internal issue, about the practice internally? Is it about an external issue? Is it a national pressure or is it something else? And then, as I say, we'll put them all together and then we'll be able to feed back to you what the sort of top priority themes are. Just to get a bit of feedback, let's have a chat about this. So I'm going to just ask groups around the room. So let's start at the back here. Can you give us your top issue, what it was about, and kind of talk us through it? Anybody? I'm looking at you.
Probably the top one, the one we talked most about, was staff development. There isn't time for that. Not really the investment. It's always the last thing talked about.
Yeah, okay. So that's from the point of view of the practice manager, really. You're the staff that you have in the practice. And is it a kind of feeling of, are they fit for purpose? Have you got the right staff? Have you got the right numbers? Have you got the right structure? Is it development issues?
It's development issues, really, and keeping pace with change, changing demand.
Yeah.
You can't pay the amount of money for somebody to attract the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's lots of practices in the last 2 or 3 years who haven't been able to afford or justify pay increases for their staff. I think it's really difficult managing people in that environment when financially you can't reward them anymore. Yeah, okay, thanks for that. I'm sure that's going to be reflected in lots of other people's issues, but staff certainly is one of them. So let's just go around, just kind of the next group along. What was one of your top issues, or your top issue?
Mainly around CCG.
Right, okay.
There's been lots and lots of changes. We're not completely sure about the lines of responsibility. How's that going to change in April?
Yes.
General practice.
Yeah, yeah.
The lines of communication are very blurred at the moment.
Yeah.
And because of the demise of PCT, there's what little corporate memory is currently there is going to disappear. That's not good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all change again, isn't it? As if we don't have enough change. And for yourselves, I know it's really important to know who deals with what, where you can go to when you need to, and that's all changing. The CCG structure's still not clear. Not clear as well where practice managers are fitting in with that, and how much influence you're going to have, what your expectations are. So it's a sort of pressure from downwards, isn't it, from outside. Okay, thanks for that. Let's move along, the sort of next group along, wherever you are.
Our number one was increasing external pressures influencing our ability to manage our workload.
Yeah, so it's the pressures from outside increasing all the time, and your own workload. And I've just been round to a couple of groups and said, tell me what your top key issues are. They workload, and workload. I think they probably comes into it, doesn't it? And that's what I hear a lot from managers. It's always been a really busy job, hasn't it? And now it just feels as if the pressures are just becoming more and more. The internal pressures from the staff, the external pressures from outside, the CCG, and then you're not quite sure what your expectations are, what's been expected of you. Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to another group, it's sort of round about here-ish.
And we said GP engagement.
Keeping engagement. GP engagement. Oh, that's a good one, isn't it? That's a really good one. GP engagement. Is that in terms of them being aware and part of what you're doing? Or, you know, is it, what does that mean? Is that about them going off the ball and saying, can't cope with this, I'm too busy with my clinical? Is it? Yeah? All those things. Anything else that kind of feel that, you know, if your GPs were more engaged, then it would make your job better, easier? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, absolutely, yeah. And the patients don't realise that, you know, they just want to see the doctor, don't they? They don't realise that you've got all this stuff going on outside, which we have to actually engage with. You can't say, no, we're not going to go. And actually, if you don't go, then you miss out on things. So it's really that balance, isn't it, of all the other stuff and fitting it in. And you've still got your demand for appointments. You've still got to provide all those appointments. Thanks very much. Let's go to the next group here.
We've got CQC.
Oh, CQC.
That's going on as well.
CQC. No. What is it? Yeah, that horrible thing looming up. We've got some more information on that today. So hopefully it's starting to feel that you kind of know what you're doing. But how does that feel for you from the practice's point of view?
Just with everything else going on, is that as well as, you know, that's sort of a separate issue, but it is still
Yeah.
to deal with that while we're dealing with it.
It just feels like the last straw, doesn't it, really? You've got just something else and having to put it all in place and be responsible for it. Yeah, okay, thank you. Let's sort of drift along to a group, the next group down then. Would that be this group here? I'm looking at you.
Patient expectation is too high these days.
Patient expectation is too high. Okay, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I suppose it depends what your feeling is about what's high, what's too high. I guess what you're saying is that according to the patient surveys, they want things that we can't necessarily provide, times that we can't necessarily provide, and you know their expectations is different from what we can do. And how does that impact on your roles?
Because when the survey results come, it's very low.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So immediately, I mean, that alerts you to having to try and do something about it and improve things.
Sometimes it is single-handed practice, and the patient questionnaire is saying, have you seen the doctor of your choice? And they say no.
Right, okay. Well, who else can you see? Okay. Yeah, okay. Thanks very much. That's great. We'll leave you on that point. Let's move on to the next group here, round about here. Just about, go on. I think it'll be behind you at the moment. Yeah, go on.
We agree with the group at the back, really, about the problem with the excessive demands on both GPs and our time and our resources by far too many external organisations and departments within them.
Yeah, okay. So is...
Resources to be able to.
Yeah, right. Is that different from what it was before? Is this something that, you know, is this something that's changed over the last few years, or? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I worked in practice 8 years ago, loads and loads of emails, you know, every day, wanting this, wanting that, information, you had no idea why they wanted it. But now it seems to be worse. I mean, people say, you know, it's just ridiculous. And you actually feel you've got to respond to all these requests, but actually not really sure why or how valuable they are or what they're adding. And it just feels another pressure for you. Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. So yourselves then, this group here.
The main one, as far as I'm concerned, one of lack of resources.
Lack of resources.
We don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough money, obviously, and even if we had the doctors and nurses, we'd have nowhere to put them.
Right.
So we've got major problems. This size is constantly going up.
Yeah.
That's risen quite considerably over the last few years, and we can't even put a hold on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In order to
yeah, yeah. It's just so frustrating. There are so many practices who are in absolutely dreadful premises that should be condemned. And they're really trying to manage to provide good services with everything else. People hot desking, you know, somebody's sitting in a cupboard somewhere doing something. The practice manager drifts around trying to find a room to work in. And actually then you've got more patients coming in. You actually need more doctors, more nurses. Can you get them? Not necessarily.
The nearest practice to this site here, from the I think the 5th largest practice in Milton.
Right.
And the worst funded.
Yes, yeah. And that's, you know, yeah, that's right. And lots of, you know, PMS practices tend to do better than GMS, and GMS practices, sometimes the funding, nobody understands it and it doesn't seem fair. So, and you've probably got, you know, more workload in your kind of area than other areas. So lots of things there about the resources, financial and otherwise, and premises, big issue for lots of practices. Thank you very much for that. Have we asked your group here? Are you part of that group? Go on then.
Yeah, we talked a lot about finance, but really uncertainty in finances. That means that you're in a position you can't plan. You know, Peter talked about a 10-year vision.
Yes.
You've not really got vision really beyond 31st of March because you just don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
Which links in with staff development.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you kind of got a reasonable idea, but you don't know if it's going to increase or decrease or what hoops. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's not going to increase, is it? But you're not sure how much it's going to go down or what hoops you're going to have to go through to maintain it at this level. It is really difficult for a business to plan like that, isn't it? That kind of uncertainty makes all decision-making really sticky, doesn't it, with the partners?
Because you just can't make decisions.
Yeah.
Everything is short term. You just look at the actual price.
Yes, yeah.
Instead of actually planning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, great. Thank you for that. Are you another group here? Oh, what about you people along here? Protecting practice income, so the same sort of thing about finances. And how does that impact with you?
Well, again, it comes back to trying to plan for the future. If you don't know what your income is going to be, you can't protect your current income levels, you're facing inevitable getting into offload staff, reduce services.
Yes, yeah. Yes, yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, I mean, the difficulty is now that I think we've had good years, actually, with finances. I mean, the money went up a lot with the new contract, and it's only just really levelling and coming down. But, of course, the GPs, they're the owners of the business, and their income is the profits, isn't it? So their profits are going down. Nobody likes that, do they? But we've still got to run, you've still got to run your practices and your businesses. And, you know, there's quite a lot of tension around that, isn't there? Thank you for that. How about this group? Are you another group here?
We are, but everything that we talked about
Is already on there, yeah. What was the top one for yourselves?
I think it was our workload.
Workload. Is that your personal workload or the whole practice work?
It's a mix. I mean, my personal workload is so stupid at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm finding how it's way beyond what I get paid.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of these colleagues here and the same situation.
Yeah. Does everybody feel that? Does anybody feel that they're not working? Does anybody come in, have a cup of coffee, read a few emails, have another cup of coffee, go and have lunch, have a long lunch, and then think, oh, it's time to go home now? Lunch, you know, that sort of thing you're supposed to have in the middle of the day. Yeah, she can't remember it. Yeah, no, it's tough, isn't it? And it's not good for you, is it? You know, I mean, when I work with managers, they say, oh, you know, working ridiculous hours. And you kind of want to say why, but you know why. You know, because you're really committed. Actually, you know, if you weren't, you'd just say, 5 o'clock, finish now, go home. But you know that it's still there. The next day you've got to go back to it. And that's really tough, isn't it? I suppose from one thing I would say is that you have to look at who else you've got in the practice. Sometimes you just really have to be, you know, you have to do that. You have to think, who else have I got to manage this practice with me? Have I got enough staff? Have I got the right staff? Am I trying to manage everything, when really I need to be able to delegate all that stuff, really.
I looked at that, I have to say, very briefly.
Yeah.
And I've got some very good staff who don't have enough hours, don't have the capacity to take more hours on. And I've got some not so good staff who've got more than enough hours but don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
So I'm stuck between one and the other.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And that means a change management, which is, requires quite a lot of planning and time and everything. But yeah, sometimes you just have to look at that and think, right, in the future, this is where I want to get, and that's, how I'm going to plan to get there. But then changing staff contracts and what people do isn't easy, is it? So yeah, we're just recognising all the issues here, but thank you for that. How about this group here?
Very similar to the red. The top one was drop in income. So,
Drop in income, yeah.
And with the onset of CCGs coming and the uncertainty of budgets, income, it might affect.
Yeah, okay, right. So very much income here and how that's going to affect the practice. We've got enough time, so I'm just going to carry on going round because it's really nice to hear. Are you a group here? You're with, okay. What's your...
Strange enough, I'll give you the ones that have popped up. Our number one was income, funding contracts, question mark, the unknown.
Yeah.
We have fixed costs and unknown income. How are we going to, as a business, adjust to that?
Okay, so another really key issue here on mainly on income and managing to plan for the future. And what did you mean about contracts then?
Well, again, income for contracts are going to be out there, what our income's going to be.
Yes, yeah. Do you think we're going to be able to influence things with the CCGs and say, we can provide these services, we have some money into the practice, get a bit more money in? Do you think that's going to be a reality?
Well, possibility. Our number three was actually practice managers' input into CCGs.
Yeah, right. Oh. So, what's the situation at the moment with these people? Are you involved in CCGs? Do you actually go to the meetings and are you part of the decision making? Or are you more there just to be told what's going on? Is it mixed? Who thinks you're actually involved in the decision making? Go on, Ree. So no influence. Right, okay.
I've spent a lot of time trying to inquire why CCGs actually don't have a practice manager on the board. And I get the impression, actually, in fact, it was said to my face, that they just don't feel the practice managers are up to it.
Charming.
It's kind of related to that topic. It's about, general practice does need to change, and there are new skills that we need in general practice to survive this new world, as per Darwin. And at the moment, people are all saying they're stretched with what they're doing already. The demands are coming in there more and more. And actually what I think it's about is actually resourcing primary care so that we can develop those new skills and play a really important contributing part to the way the NHS needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got two of these now. Thank you for that. So if we did have better resourcing, then, which they've always promised, haven't they? It's always been, yes, we're going to give you loads of resources, you can do it all, you're doing most of the work, so we'll make sure the money follows you. It doesn't quite seem to work like that, does it? And then when you get a good idea, they suddenly say, well, that's not fair, because nobody else can do that. So you think, well, actually, that was a good idea. So it's difficult to get your way through all these hoops, isn't it? But I still think if we can influence, then we can make changes and we can sort of, hopefully we can make some changes. So let's move on. So have you done, what about this group here then?
We find that most of our partners, they know the changes are coming in, but they're like, they don't want to know. They don't really want to take it on board, and they leave most of it to us to do. So we don't feel that we're getting the support from our partners.
Yes, okay. Thank you for that. I mean, that's...
Picture of the aeroplane.
Yeah. And who's flying the plane? Okay. I mean, yeah, I really do feel, feel for you there because this is on actually. Is it on? Is it on? Because that's another thing that I hear when I work with practices and work with managers is they can feel quite exasperated because they're not actually the owners. Sometimes they are if they're a managing partner, but usually they're not the owners of the business. And yet they're the ones who feel as if they care more than anybody else. They're always there more than anybody else because lots and lots of part-time partners, aren't there? And they're trying to manage a partnership of part-time partners. Getting decisions really difficult, isn't it? And they're trying to prop up the staff who are actually thinking, well, who's the leader here? And the staff look at the partners, they think, do they care? Do you know what I mean? So it's really hard for us, isn't it, as managers, for you as managers, in managing that situation. I think managing up is as hard as managing down, isn't it? Okay, thank you for that. How about yourself on here? Were you a group here? Yeah.
Very similar, really. Managing change with a reluctant team.
Of a reluctant team, yeah. Is that going up as well as down? Yeah, okay. So any tips on that or anything that you can see that is particularly impacted? What? Just tell me, is there anything that's particularly impacted on, that sort of managing change in your practice?
I think it's just that if you've got the engagement of the team and they understand why you're having to make that change, they'll support you better through it. Yes. So, but that means you've got to have the time and the resource to explain it all in a method that they're going to understand.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So, a few issues there really. Thinking about what the change is and having the time. It's really important, isn't it? Have the time to explain, because you just don't get people on board straight away, do you? I mean, if you say to somebody, right, we want you to do this, they'll think, really? Why? So then you kind of go into why you want them to do it, what do they think about it, what benefits is it going to have for them and the practice, and eventually they come on board and they're happy. But, all that takes a lot of time, doesn't it? And actually stopping the practice so you can devote that time is really quite hard. Lots of practices struggle with training and those sort of times when you do stop what you're doing just to talk about things. Yeah, thank you very much for that. It's good, really good. How about is it the next group along here?
Most of what we've got down has also been covered, but I'll just talk up.
Just talk
out.
Yeah.
However, our first one was around CQC.
Right.
Fully understanding the requirements, the next steps, and maintaining compliance.
Maintaining compliance, yeah. So lots and lots around CQC. Yeah, okay.
And then also we had CCG on there as well.
Yeah.
And very much focusing on the practice managers involved.
Yeah, okay. Right, so lots of things that are already... Thank you very much for that. How about the next group along then? Is this group here?
We talked about basically things that everybody else has, but on top of that, we have the National Commissioning Board because we're concerned about the contracts of general practice and there's no local impact.
Right, okay, yes.
How with the CCGs can we access quality premiums?
Okay, yeah.
And privatisation of general practice, which we see is on the politicians' agenda.
Yes, yeah, okay. So really looking at the strategy and the bigger stuff and how it's going to influence, really interesting, isn't it? What's going to happen to PMS? Does anybody know? Do you know, Pete?
It's certainly staying for the time being. There are still talks about an individual and single national contract, and I have a feeling Beverly, who's standing at the back, may well be mentioning things like that. So as far as we're aware, the current contractual mechanisms will stay in place as they are at the moment.
And will the practices, who will they negotiate their contracts with in the future? Is it the National Commissioning Board? Right, okay, that's going to be fun, isn't it?
Yes, and Beverly will be telling us all about that. Can I just take us back a stage? There was, is there a group that you haven't actually got to?
I think we've nearly got to everybody,
um,
but there's maybe one or two groups that we've got. Should we just finish off?
Yeah, I've got
yeah?
to finish.
Yeah, I think we're nearly there, but I think your group there. Is it this group here? Or let's just finish off. Who haven't we done? Yeah, go on.
We have financial balance as our top one. How we're going to provide more services with potentially less money.
Right. Yes, okay, okay. Thanks very much. So similar things there. This group here? Oh, come back to you.
Practice managers and skills and training, because we've heard how we're all being driving seat, but actually what skills have some of us got to
Yes, and to be honest, I think in practices, practice managers are the ones who need to keep their skills, you know, and often the people who don't go because it means a day out of the practice or they can't find the relevant training. But if you don't keep your skills up and keep your knowledge base up, then you know there's not much chance for the other staff. But it's actually accessing it and the time that it takes to do that, and the funding as well. Thank you very much for that. New practice managers, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, there isn't. There isn't. You're quite right. And yeah, yeah. I mean, there kind of was the AMSPA. I think it's still there, but it doesn't quite feel, you know, it's okay, but it's a personal thing, really. But yeah, actually accessing for new practice managers. And actually, I think there's a flurry of practice managers retiring at the moment. I think they're looking at all the future and thinking, oh, I think I'll retire. I'd like GPs, actually. I think they're looking at revalidation and thinking, actually, I don't want to go down there. So, you know, lots of new managers coming in, and not often from outside. You know, probably a lot of people here have come in from outside the first time they've been in general practice, and you think, ooh, this is a culture shock. And then finding the information and finding the development opportunities, and you know, it really is. And other managers mentoring, I mean, that's really nice. That's happening so much more now than it used to. But nevertheless, you really are on your own in the practice, aren't you, trying to manage with, you know, with skills that you know you need to get up to speed. Thank you very much for that. How about the group here? I think it's probably the last one. Thank you, Catherine. Managing change, yeah.
Who and how would you do it? And at the same time, keeping up morale with the stress levels being high.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, that's one we haven't mentioned, isn't it, about morale? And you know, if you don't keep up morale, who's going to do it? So it is the practice manager's job, really, to keep everybody upbeat. And sometimes yourself, you can feel quite down. But, you know, you've still got that obligation to go in and talk to everybody. I mean, how many GPs go into their rooms in the morning without even saying hello? I mean, what's all that about? You know, and the staff say, well, I think they're in, but they haven't even spoken to anybody. Thank you very much. I think we've done every group. Has anybody any group not responded? But just to remind you again, when you finish, when we have a break, if the person who's kept the notes can just go and have a look at those flip charts and say, yeah, I think that goes on there. Yeah, that one kind of goes in there. And then we'll feed it all back to you later. So Pete, just to go back to.
Yes, I was just going to say that something that comes out of this to me is how much support are practice managers getting from their GPs? And are GPs genuinely showing leadership at a time when general practice is so critical to the NHS? And I think an awful lot of this made me feel practice managers are terribly isolated from the partners, just the way people were putting things over. And I think I want to leave you with potentially with a question is, how do we develop leadership skills in GPs? They've been trained as clinicians. They have been trained to speak to patients, but actually when it comes to leadership and when it comes to taking on and making very, very difficult and very serious decisions, I think there's a big deficit there that needs to be addressed, and I will leave that with you, and hopefully we'll get some answers.
Yes, we got to.
So one of the things is, first of all, that GPs need to recognise that just because they're a partner, they don't automatically have leadership skills. And that's the first hurdle, because many partners will actually take the view, I'm the partner, therefore I obviously lead. Well, they don't. They don't understand the concept of leadership. I think where practice managers are partners as well, we're ahead of the pack and we're lucky to be in that role. And I wouldn't envy somebody going in who hasn't got the influence at this stage in the political arena.
Thank you very much for that. Any other sort of comments before we wrap this session up? Anything else that anybody else?
When we recently had a review and looked at our budget, we had a patient who's had a liver transplant, and we were told, this is outrageous, you know, you're spending far too much money. What are you supposed to do? And I think that's got lost somewhere. Are we going to start rationing who we take on our books? You just need one with a liver transplant, kidney transplant patient. Budget is out of the, you know, out. And I think that's a real problem. Well, you do, but the problem is what's going to happen with the CCG when you're looking at your budgets, because we don't know, they're coming and telling us, you know, you've got to reduce this. And as one of our doctors actually said to somebody when they said, your cardiology referrals are very high, he just said, well, when someone's had a heart attack, I think I just have to send them into hospital. You know, what do you do? We've forgotten patients here, and I think that's what we're all about, patient care, and we're not providing it.
Thanks, brilliant. So I think we'll wrap that session up.
Thank you very much, Patricia. That was very helpful.